They declared me dead to steal everything, so I crashed my own funeral. The message that shattered my world. I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a name I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Mrs. Jensen, my old neighbor, the woman who used to bake lemon squares every Sunday and slide them over the fence for me when I was 10. She hadn't spoken to me since everything went to hell. I hesitated. The notification preview read, "I'm so sorry, Amelia. I saw what happened today. I can't believe it." My heart gave a strange thump. My hands, still holding a towel, froze in place. I clicked on the message. It was a video. For a second, the screen was black. Then it opened to a slow, shaky view of a church. St. Martin's, my parents' church. The same one they dragged me to every Easter, even when I didn't believe anymore, even when I didn't belong anymore. The camera panned inside. A man in a suit, my father, stood at the pulpit. His face was pale, his hands trembling. My mother sat in the front pew, veil over her eyes, dabbing her cheeks delicately with a lace handkerchief. And then I saw it, my picture, a framed portrait, resting next to a white casket. It was the photo from my college graduation, the one where I was finally smiling again after months of therapy and healing. I hadn't even known my family still had it, but there it was, surrounded by lilies, on a coffin, and I was watching my own funeral. I dropped the towel. My fingers were trembling. My breath came short and fast. My first instinct was to check the date. The timestamp on the video said, "Today." The location was real. Everything looked real. But how? I was very much alive, standing in my one-bedroom apartment in Denver, drinking chamomile tea, doing laundry, not dead, not buried. I turned up the volume. My father's voice, calm, rehearsed, echoed from the phone. Amelia was always different. She saw the world in a way we couldn't understand. But she was our daughter. We did what we could. And now, she's gone. My mother's shoulders shook in manufactured sobs. Someone behind the camera whispered, "So young. Such a shame." I sat down, nearly spilling my tea. None of this made sense. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 3 years. True, but dead? How could they possibly think I was... Wait. No. They didn't think I was dead. They knew exactly what they were doing. I watched the video again. Slower this time. Every word, every movement, every lie. She passed away peacefully overseas. Her life had taken her far from home, but we always kept her in our prayers. There was no mention of how, no real details, just vague statements that could be molded to fit any version of truth they wanted to tell. Then my younger brother, Noah, stood up, his face solemn, eyes glassy. She left behind journals, thoughts, dreams. She was misunderstood, but she meant well. We'll miss her. Journals? I never gave them anything. I barely left behind a forwarding address when I moved to Colorado. I had started over, on purpose. I pressed pause. Something inside me cracked. They didn't just write me off. They erased me. I paced the room, heart racing. Tried calling Noah, straight to voicemail. Tried texting my mother. "What is going on?" No response. I scrolled through Facebook, then Instagram. There it was. A post from my cousin Jennifer. "Rest in peace, Amelia Ray Whitmore. Gone too soon. Your soul can finally rest." Another from someone I hadn't spoken to since middle school. Life is cruel. Just saw the memorial video for Amelia, wishing peace to her family. I clicked through comments. People believed it. They thought I was dead. A part of me wanted to scream, to call every one of them and yell, "I'm alive, you idiots." But another part, a colder, deeper part, whispered, "Why now? Why this? Why would your family declare you dead? Unless they needed me to be." I sat down again and opened my old Gmail account. I hadn't used it in years, but I still remembered the password. Account inactive. Deactivated due to deceased status. What? I clicked into support. Asked for clarification. The reply was fast. This account was reported as belonging to a deceased user in 2021. Per our policy, access was revoked and archival initiated. 2021. That was the year I moved away. The year I told my father I wasn't coming home again. The year I refused to sign over power of attorney for the family estate. The year I told them I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was fine. My breath caught in my throat. They didn't just cut me off. They declared me dead. Legally, socially, digitally. They scrubbed me out like a typo in their perfect family narrative. And now, they were hosting a funeral for the daughter they silenced. I opened a folder in my cabinet. Flight records, tax receipts, apartment lease agreements. All signed and stamped in my name. In the US, in plain daylight, I was right here, not missing, not dead. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. That night, I called a lawyer. He was confused at first, until I laid it out. Every lie, every forged document, every thread of manipulation. You're saying your family declared you dead without proof of death? Yes. And you have documentation that you've been alive the entire time? Every day of it. Miss Whitmore, this is fraud. Big time. There are serious consequences. I nodded slowly. Good. But I didn't want revenge. Not yet. What I wanted was the truth. And maybe, just maybe, a front row seat at my own funeral. Digging up the past. I spent the entire night digging. The lawyer I'd contacted was cautious. He said it would take time to navigate the legal mess my parents had created. But I wasn't about to wait. I couldn't. As dawn crept over the horizon, I stared at my laptop screen, surrounded by piles of papers, each more damning than the last. My father, the man who had always preached about family honor and integrity, had turned my name into a ghost. My mother, who had once taught me to always keep my head high, had now forced me into the shadows. I ran another search for my name. Amelia Ray Whitmore. This time, I went deeper. I accessed the public record system, hoping I could find some shred of truth that would connect my family to the falsification of my death. And there it was, a certificate. Amelia Ray Whitmore. Date of death, July 16th, 2021. Cause of death, car accident. Status, deceased. The words were cold. The certificate looked real, but it wasn't. I clicked through the pages, my fingers trembling as I read the forged details. They hadn't just declared me dead on paper. They'd created a false narrative about how I died. They had written a story about me, a car accident overseas, closed casket, cremation. None of it was true. I wasn't dead. I was living. I had been living this entire time. But why would they do this? Why would my own family erase me completely from their lives? That's when the pieces began to click together. I pulled up the family business registry, the one I hadn't looked at in years. The same company my parents had worked hard to build, had worked us all too hard to keep up with the perfect image. That's when I saw it. The trust fund my grandparents had left for me, the one I was supposed to inherit after their passing. It was transferred to Claire, my younger sister. The transfer had taken place 6 months after my supposed death. I stared at the screen, the room feeling colder by the second. I'd been a pawn in their game. Not only did they erase me from their lives, but they also profited off my absence. The inheritance I should have received had been quietly handed over to Claire, who had always been their golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who had made mistakes, but always found a way out. And now she was the one reaping the benefits of my death. Claire, my younger sister, the one who had always been the apple of our parents' eye, had been the one who'd stolen the money. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The day my parents turned on me. The day everything changed. It wasn't me who had embezzled money from the family business. It was Claire, but they didn't want the world to know that. They needed a scapegoat, and I had been the perfect one. I took a deep breath, looking at the screen in front of me as everything fell into place. I wasn't just erased because of a mistake I made. I was erased because I knew too much. I knew about Claire's reckless behavior. I knew about the embezzlement. And when they needed someone to blame, they had thrown me under the bus. The moment they declared me dead, they thought they could erase me from their past forever. But I wasn't gone. I was here, and it was time for me to take control. I spent the next few days compiling evidence, proof of my existence, copies of flight tickets, rental agreements, emails, tax returns, anything that proved I hadn't just vanished. I hadn't disappeared into thin air. I had been living, working, surviving, and I had to make them pay for what they did to me. The day I walked into the law office, I could feel the fire building inside me. The young attorney, a man who seemed to be in his early 30s, stared at me as I laid out the stack of documents. He seemed unsure at first. I could see the wheels turning in his head. But once I slid the forged death certificate across the desk, his expression changed. "You're challenging your own death?" he asked, stunned. I nodded. "I'm not dead," I said simply, "but I plan to haunt them." He blinked, then nodded slowly. "This is definitely fraud. There are serious consequences." "I don't care about consequences," I replied. "I care about the truth, and I want them to know that I'm alive." He looked at me for a moment, as though trying to gauge if I was serious. Then he sighed. "All right, we'll start with a fraud complaint and a motion to revoke the declaration of death. It'll take time." I shook my head. "I don't have time. My memorial is this Sunday. They're holding a public ceremony for me." His eyebrows shot up. "What?" "They're holding a memorial, and I'm going to show up." That night, I couldn't sleep. The idea of showing up at my own memorial, crashing the very event my family had orchestrated to erase me, was intoxicating. I stood at the window of my apartment, looking out at the glittering lights of the city below. I could almost feel the tension in the air, the feeling that something was about to explode. They thought they could bury me. They thought they could erase me from everything. But they were wrong. Sunday came, and the church was already packed when I arrived across the street. St. Martin's was quiet, dignified, exactly what you would expect for such an occasion. I stood outside, watching as mourners filed into the church. My mother and father were already inside, no doubt preparing to put on the show of their lives. Inside, The organ played softly, candles flickered, and there was my picture, framed and resting on the casket. This was their stage, their moment of closure. But it wasn't for me, it was for them. I waited until the moment of silence began. Then I pushed open the heavy oak doors. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot in a room full of whispers. I stepped inside, slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked on the marble floor, and all eyes turned to me, gasping, whispers blooming like wildfire. It felt like a dream, a nightmare, but it was real. I walked down the aisle, ignoring the stunned looks and the open mouths, and when I reached the front, I turned to face them all. My father's face was white. My mother had fainted, her hand clutching her chest. And Claire, oh, Claire, stood there, frozen in place. I raised my hand to silence them. I heard I died, I said, my voice calm. But I'm here to correct the story. A ripple went through the crowd. Phones came out. People were filming, but I wasn't done. I'm not dead. I've been living, working, surviving, and everything they've told you about me is a lie. I turned to my parents. You didn't lose a daughter. You threw me away. The room was silent. I looked at Claire, standing in the front row, still clutching her pearls. You thought I was gone, but I'm here, and everything that's been transferred to you, the trust fund, the inheritance, it's mine. I let the words hang in the air. The truth was finally out, and nothing they could do could silence it now. Unraveling the web of lies. The moment I walked into the church, I knew I had done what I set out to do. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life, my identity, and the future that had been so cruelly stolen from me. The crowd in the church was still in shock. The air hung heavy with disbelief, but I wasn't there to comfort them or explain. No, I was there to confront the truth, to force my family and the world to see what they had done. My heart pounded in my chest, but the fire within me burned brighter than any fear. I'd waited for this moment for so long, too long, and now that I was standing in front of them, I didn't have time for regrets. I couldn't take my eyes off my parents. My mother, who had always played the part of the grieving, nurturing matriarch, now sat trembling in her seat, pale as a ghost. Her eyes were wide with terror, unable to comprehend that the daughter she had publicly discarded had just walked back into her life, alive and breathing. My father, the one who had always stood at the helm of our family's legacy, stared at me, his mouth hanging open, as if he couldn't decide whether he was seeing a ghost or witnessing some kind of divine intervention. The years of control he had over me, over us, had just slipped away in that one moment. But they weren't the only ones who were stunned. And then there was Claire, my younger sister, the one who had always been their golden child, the one who had replaced me with a smile and a wave, the one who had silently profited off my supposed death. She stood there in a daze, her grip tightening on the pearls that once symbolized her innocence, now a symbol of her guilt, her jaw clenched, her eyes darting between me and the crowd. She hadn't expected me to be alive, to expose the truth so publicly. And in that moment, I saw the recognition of what she had done, the realization that her perfect little world was about to crumble. I had expected them to react this way. Shock, disbelief, anger. But what I hadn't anticipated was the sudden wave of guilt that rushed over me. My father's face, pale and filled with silent regret, made me question whether he truly had a heart beneath that icy exterior. My mother's trembling sobs, though fake and rehearsed, seemed to pierce the air with something I hadn't considered: remorse. Did they feel sorry? Did they truly regret what they had done? No, they had erased me, but they hadn't felt guilty until they realized they had lost control. They had believed that if they erased me from their lives, they could bury the truth. But I was standing there, forcing them to face everything they had buried in their attempts to protect themselves. The room was dead silent. I could hear the sound of the air conditioning, the shuffle of shoes, and the occasional gasp from the crowd. But the most deafening thing was the silence from my family. My parents, Claire. None of them spoke, not even a whisper. They were waiting for me to explain myself, to give them an out. But I wasn't there to give them an out. I was there to expose them. I turned to face the room. "You're all part of this," I said, my voice calm but steady. "You've all been fed lies, told stories of my death that never happened, and believed them without ever asking me. You've all been complicit in this charade. And now, here I am, exposing the truth. So don't be shocked. Don't look at me with pity. This is what you all deserve." I could see the horror in their eyes, but there was something else there too. It was a shift, a realization. They understood now. This wasn't just about me. This was about everything they had hidden. The lies, the manipulation, the deceit. And they were the ones who had to face it. I turned back to Claire. Her perfect facade was crumbling before my eyes. There she stood, her pearls slipping from her hands as she tried to process everything. I didn't give her a chance to speak. "You didn't just take my life, Claire," I said, stepping closer. "You took everything I had, my inheritance, my future, my place in this family, and you've done it all with a smile. You didn't just replace me, Claire. You erased me." She flinched at the words, her lips trembling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. But I didn't want her apology. I didn't want her excuses. "You never meant for it to happen?" I scoffed. "Then why did you let them make up a story about my death? Why did you let them bury me without even a second thought? Don't tell me you didn't mean it." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I couldn't afford to. The truth was too heavy, too important. My family had spent years playing their roles, pretending to be perfect. And now I was exposing them for what they were: liars, manipulators, and thieves. I turned back to my parents. My father's face was stone. His lips were pursed tightly, his hands shaking as he held onto the microphone, like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. My mother, still in her seat, looked like she might faint at any moment. But I could see it now, the cracks in their armor, the fear, the guilt, the regret. "This isn't just about me," I said, my voice steady but louder now. "This is about everything you've hidden, all the lies you've told, all the money you've stolen, everything." I stepped toward my father. "I know about the embezzlement. I know about the money you took from the family business, the things you've done to cover it up. And I know you've been using me as a scapegoat for it all." His face went pale, his eyes widening in shock. He tried to speak, but his voice was lost. "Don't even try to deny it," I said. "You destroyed my life to cover up your own crimes, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." The room was silent again. The weight of my words hung in the air like an anchor, pulling everything down with it. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was war. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, police investigations, and calls from family members who either supported me or distanced themselves from the scandal. But one thing was certain. I wasn't backing down. I filed the paperwork to revoke my death certificate, to challenge the fraud they had committed. My lawyer, who had initially been cautious, was now all in. He knew we had a case, and we were going to make them pay for what they'd done. But the fight was far from over. They didn't just try to erase me. They tried to steal my future. And now, they were going to pay for it. By the time the investigation was underway, the media had caught wind of the story. My name, once erased, was now on the front pages. I had become the symbol of resilience, of a woman who had fought her way back from the grave, not just for herself, but for the truth. The court case was set. My family was about to be exposed for everything they had done. The embezzlement, the fraud, the lies. And I would finally get the justice I deserved. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The fight was far from over. And even as the world watched, I was determined to see this through, to the end, unveiling the hidden truth. After weeks of digging into the dark truth behind my so-called death, I could feel the pressure mounting. The deeper I went, the more I realized that the lies my family had spun were only the surface of something far more sinister. The morning after I discovered my official death certificate, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about bringing to light what they had done to me, but also what they had been hiding all these years. My lawyer, the young attorney who had been helping me challenge the fraudulent documents, had promised me we'd get to the bottom of things. But even he hadn't known what was truly behind it. He was just starting to piece together the legalities of the situation. What I was about to uncover would rock everyone to their core. I had one more step to take before confronting my family at the memorial. A step that would take me deep into the very underbelly of my family's business dealings, into a world I never thought I'd be a part of. As I sifted through the public records, I found a name that I hadn't seen in years. Vincent Montgomery. He was the family's lawyer, more like a shadow figure in the background. I remembered meeting him once at a family event when I was young. He was always so detached, like a ghost in the room, never too involved with anything, yet always there when the big decisions were made. This was the man I needed to speak to. He was the one who had access to everything, the hidden accounts, the illicit transactions, and the people behind the scenes who had been pulling the strings. He was the one who knew the full story. I pulled up his information and found out that he still lived in the same upscale neighborhood where I grew up, just a few blocks away from my family's mansion. His office, of course, was near downtown. A tall, glass building with a clean, corporate facade. I knew it wouldn't be easy to walk in there and get anything out of him, but I had no choice. If I was going to uncover what they had been hiding, Vincent Montgomery was the key. That afternoon, I walked into his office with a sense of purpose. The receptionist, a young woman with sharp features and an even sharper stare, gave me a once-over as if she was used to people walking in with big plans. "I'd like to speak to Mr. Montgomery," I said, keeping my voice steady. She gave me a polite, rehearsed smile and gestured to the door. "He's expecting you. Please, go right in." The office was exactly as I expected. Modern, cold, and impersonal. Vincent sat behind a massive desk, his fingers steepled as he looked at me over the rims of his glasses. His face was older, but his eyes hadn't lost that calculating, icy stare. "Maya DeQuand," he said, his voice like velvet over sharp edges. To what do I owe the pleasure? I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know what you did, and I want answers. Vincent's expression didn't change. He remained calm, almost too calm. What exactly do you think I did? I slid a file across the desk, filled with copies of documents I had obtained from the Public Records Office. You were the one who filed my death certificate, Vincent. You were the one who erased me from existence. His eyes flickered for a split second, but his composure returned immediately. That was a long time ago. It's all in the past. I leaned forward, my voice low. It's not in the past. You and my family. This was never about me. This was about covering up something much bigger. What's the real story here, Vincent? For a moment, there was silence. Then he sighed, a sound so full of regret, it almost seemed real. You've always been a curious one, Maya. Too curious for your own good. I didn't flinch. I'm not asking for a confession, Vincent. I want you to tell me the truth. About the business. About Elena. About everything. He finally set the file down, his eyes narrowing. You don't understand what you're asking, do you? It's not just about your family's reputation. It's bigger than that. Much bigger. I leaned in even closer. What do you mean? What are you talking about? His gaze flickered for the first time. The business your family ran. It's not just a family enterprise, Maya. It's part of something. A network. An underground operation. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of operation? He hesitated. You're talking about international money laundering, Maya. And when your sister, when Elena got involved, it wasn't just about stealing money. It was about securing positions, making sure your family stayed untouchable, no matter the cost. I was stunned. The truth was worse than I had imagined. My family wasn't just covering up my death for money. They were hiding a criminal empire, and I was about to be buried under the weight of it all, both literally and figuratively. Vincent continued. When you were pushed out, it wasn't just because of Elena's mistake. It was because you were a liability. You were too smart, too unpredictable. Your family couldn't afford to have you in their way when they were making deals with people who have no mercy. I sat back, the weight of his words sinking in. So, they faked my death to cover up their dirty secrets. Vincent didn't answer directly, but his silence said it all. Why are you telling me this? I asked, still struggling to wrap my head around the enormity of what he had just revealed. Vincent finally stood up, walking around the desk to stand next to me. Because it's too late to go back, Maya. They've already dug themselves in too deep, and now it's time to make a choice. Choice? I repeated, confused. You can go back to your life, or what's left of it, and live quietly, pretending this never happened. Or, he paused, his voice dropping, you can bring it all down. Expose everything. Destroy them. A chill ran down my spine. You want me to destroy my family? I want you to make them pay, he corrected. What they did to you, it's unforgivable. You have the power to tear everything they've built down, Maya. And I'm willing to help you. A deal with the devil. I woke up to the buzzing of my phone early the next morning. The light outside was dim, filtered through the curtains like a muted memory. I wasn't ready for another day of fighting. I hadn't asked for any of this. This life, where I was trying to claw my way out of the grave that my family had dug for me. The message was from Vincent Montgomery. I had barely known the man before, but now it seemed like he was the only one I could trust. He had told me things I couldn't ignore. He had shown me the depths of my family's corruption, their alliances with shady organizations that I never imagined could be tied to my family's name. But now, Vincent was offering me something else. A chance at power. A chance at revenge. The question was whether I would take it. The message simply read, "Meet me at the office. We need to talk about your next move." I stared at the screen for a moment, heart hammering in my chest. The stakes were higher than ever. My family had erased me, turned my life into a lie, and now I was standing on the edge of a precipice, trying to decide whether to jump or step back. I dressed quickly, my mind racing with possibilities. Vincent had become my ally in this battle for the truth. He was a lawyer, yes, but he was also connected. Connected to things I didn't fully understand yet. He had been the one to give me the final piece of evidence that proved the fraud my family had committed. That proved I wasn't just erased from the records. I was legally dead. And with that death certificate came something even more horrifying. A revelation that this wasn't just about money. It was about power. My family had been part of an underground operation, one that spanned far beyond the bounds of family drama. The truth was much uglier than I had ever imagined. I arrived at his office just as the city started to wake up. The streets were busy with the usual morning rush, but there was an eerie quiet in the air. I could feel it, a tension, a waiting silence that seemed to hang over the city like a storm cloud. Vincent's office was sleek, cold. Everything about it screamed power. He was sitting behind a large desk, his usual calm demeanor in place, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, gave away the sense that something bigger was at play here. "Take a seat," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it now, something more urgent than I had ever heard. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap. The weight of what we were about to discuss hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "I have news," Vincent started, his voice low. "I've been digging deeper into your family's connections. You were right. It's not just about money. There's a larger network involved here, and it goes far beyond your family business." I felt a chill run down my spine. The idea that there was something more, something bigger, involved, terrified me, but it also gave me a sense of purpose, a clarity I hadn't had before. Vincent leaned forward, pushing a folder toward me. Inside were documents, legal papers, evidence that tied my family's empire to something much darker than I could have ever imagined. They weren't just thieves. They were players in a criminal network that spanned across borders, involving money laundering, embezzlement, and illicit dealings with high-profile individuals I had never even heard of. "The game is bigger than you thought, Maya," he said quietly. "Your family didn't just sell you out for money. They've been working with powerful people. And now those people know that you're alive. They're not happy about it." I opened the folder and scanned the documents, feeling the blood drain from my face as I processed the enormity of what Vincent was telling me. It wasn't just my family that I was fighting against anymore. There were more players involved, people who could make my family's betrayal seem like child's play. These were people with connections, people who wouldn't hesitate to bury me, or worse, if they thought I was a threat. "How deep does this go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Deep," Vincent replied simply, "and the stakes are higher than you can imagine." I looked at him, trying to keep my emotions in check, but I could feel the anger and fear building inside me. The more I learned, the more it became clear that I was in this alone. My family had cut me off. They had buried me without a second thought. Now, it seemed like the only way forward was to confront the darkness head-on. But Vincent wasn't finished yet. He slid another piece of paper across the table, a legal document that made my stomach churn. It was a motion to legally revoke the death certificate that had been filed in my name. "They've done a good job covering their tracks," Vincent continued. "But this," he tapped the document, "is the key to everything. If we can get this overturned, we can begin the legal process of exposing your family's crimes, and you can finally take back what's yours." I stared at the document in disbelief. The idea of overturning my death certificate seemed impossible, but in the back of my mind, a small voice was telling me that this was the only chance I had to expose the truth. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and forcing the people who had destroyed me to face the consequences. I took a deep breath. "What do I have to do?" Vincent leaned back, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "We go to war, Maya, and we don't stop until your family is exposed for what they truly are." I nodded, my mind racing with the possibilities. This wasn't just a fight for money. It wasn't just about taking down my family. This was a war for my freedom, for the truth, and for everything they had stolen from me. The plan was set into motion immediately. Vincent and I worked together, using every resource at our disposal to gather more evidence, to connect the dots between my family's criminal activities and the powerful network they were involved with. I was becoming more than just a pawn in their game. I was the one who would bring the game to its knees. But as we dug deeper, things began to unravel. The people my family had been working with weren't just criminals. They were part of a larger, more dangerous organization. And it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power, control, and a hidden agenda that reached far beyond what I could have ever imagined. I was playing a game I didn't fully understand, and the rules were changing every day. But one thing was clear: I wasn't going to back down. I had already lost everything once. This time, I would fight for what was mine. As I sat in my apartment late one night, looking over the papers, I was faced with a decision. The information we had gathered was enough to take down my family's empire, to expose the crimes they had committed. But it wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about survival. Vincent's warning echoed in my mind. There are people far more dangerous than your family involved in this. Was I ready to face them? Was I ready to risk everything for the truth? I had no choice. The moment I walked into that office and decided to fight back, there was no turning back. But as I prepared for the next step, one thing was certain: I wasn't going down without a fight. As the weeks passed, we gathered more evidence, tightened the net around my family, and prepared for the day we would expose them. But just when I thought I had everything in place, I received a message that changed everything. It was a warning, a threat. Someone knew what I was doing, and they were ready to stop me. The trap had been set, and now I had to decide whether to keep pushing forward or walk away before it was too late. The unseen hand. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. The deeper we dug, the more dangerous things became. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, and despite the rage and determination fueling me, I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fight. Vincent had become more than just a lawyer in this case. He was my closest ally, the one person who seemed to understand the magnitude of what was happening. But even he seemed to be walking a fine line. His warnings had grown more frequent. "There are people out there," he said, "who have the power to make this go away. They have the money, the influence. Don't think they won't use it." I hated that he was right, but there was no way I could stop now. Every time I thought about what they had done, what my family had done. My resolve grew stronger. They had erased me from existence. They had stolen not just my life, but everything that I had worked for. And now they were trying to bury the truth under a pile of lies. I couldn't let them get away with it. Not again. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. Maya, I know what you're doing, and I think you should stop. The voice was calm, cold even. It didn't sound like anyone I knew, but there was something unnervingly familiar about the tone. I wasn't sure if it was a threat, a warning, or something else entirely. All I knew was that the walls were closing in on me, and the time to act was running out. Who is this? I asked, my voice shaking slightly despite myself. You don't need to know. All you need to know is that you're out of your depth, the voice replied. We're watching. You've made a lot of noise, Maya. It's time to shut up. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there in silence, my heart pounding in my chest. They were watching. They knew. And I wasn't sure who they were, but I didn't need to. The danger was real. It was closing in fast, and I had no choice but to keep moving forward. As much as I hated the idea of going back to my family, there was one thing I had to admit. They were connected to a much larger, more dangerous world than I had initially realized. They weren't just thieves. They were players in a game that spanned far beyond the confines of our broken family. The organization they were involved with had a reach I couldn't even begin to understand. And it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, about control. It was then that Vincent suggested something I had feared, going directly to them, not in the way I had envisioned, confronting them with evidence, but rather using the very thing that had ruined me in the first place, my family's connections. Let's see if they'll help you, Vincent said one evening, a glint of something dangerous in his eyes. We'll make them believe they're in control, while you take the reins. So I wasn't sure if it was desperation or something else, but the idea of going back to them was unsettling. But if it could give me the upper hand, if it could make them expose themselves, maybe it was worth it. It was at an upscale restaurant in the heart of the city that I met with Elena. She was my sister, and yet she might as well have been a stranger. The woman I had once called family now stood before me, dressed in the finest attire money could buy. Her smile was tight, practiced. Her eyes flickered with suspicion. Maya, she said, her voice sweet but laced with something cold. I didn't expect to see you alive, but I guess we're all full of surprises. I could feel the tension crackling between us as I sat down across from her. The last time we had spoken, she had been the one who led the charge to have me erased. She was the one who had orchestrated my downfall. Now, she was sitting across from me, as if nothing had happened, her posture too perfect, her smile too fake. You know why I'm here, I said, cutting straight to the point. I know what you did, Elena. I know about the trust fund, the fake documents, the people you've been working with. You can't hide behind your lies anymore. Her smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. You're being paranoid. There's nothing to hide. You've been gone for so long, Maya. I think it's time you let go of whatever delusions you've been living with. Stop lying, I shot back. I know about the money laundering, the shady deals. I know everything. Elena's eyes narrowed, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she gestured for the waiter to bring us both a drink. You've always been dramatic, Maya, but maybe now you understand how things really work. You're not as important as you think you are. Not to me, not to anyone. That was it. That was the moment I realized that Elena hadn't just stolen my life. She had turned it into something else. Something I wasn't even sure was real anymore. She had taken everything that had once been mine and used it to build her own empire, using the very family that had disowned me to protect her. And I was done being her pawn. You think I'm done? You think I'm going to just walk away from this? No, Elena. I'm not finished yet. The tension in the room was thick, but what I said next would change everything. I'm going to take everything back, everything you've stolen from me, and I'm going to make sure you pay for every lie. After my conversation with Elena, I realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. But I also realized that I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for control. Control of my life, my identity, and my future. I met with Vincent again later that day. He could see it in my eyes. I was ready to take the next step. No more playing nice. No more pretending to be the victim. We go to war now, I told him, my voice firm. But this time, it's on my terms. I'll give Elena and the rest of them a choice. Face the truth, or lose everything. Vincent smiled, clearly impressed with my resolve. That's the Maya I've been waiting for. Let's get to work. We set the wheels in motion, gathering more evidence, digging deeper into my family's criminal activities. The deeper we went, the more I uncovered. This wasn't just about money. It was about a web of lies, corruption, and manipulation that had spanned decades. And I was going to make sure it all came crashing down. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. It wasn't just my family anymore. There were other forces at play, forces that didn't want the truth to come out. Vincent and I spent hours preparing, building our case, collecting documents that could tear my family's empire apart. And then came the final piece, a confession from one of Elena's former partners. It was a risk, but if we could get the confession on record, everything would change. The night we went to meet the informant, I knew this was it. This was my chance to take back what was mine. But I also knew that once I walked through that door, there was no going back. It wasn't just about exposing Elena anymore. It was about survival. As we sat in the dimly lit room, waiting for the informant to arrive, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The moment of truth was near. The final game. The informant finally arrived, a man named Tony, who seemed both jittery and desperate. He looked like he'd been running from something, or someone, his eyes constantly darting around the room, scanning the shadows. "Are you sure you're safe?" I asked him, my voice steady despite the gnawing anxiety in my gut. Tony glanced at the door before taking a deep breath. "I don't know how safe any of us are anymore, but what I'm about to tell you will bring them down. It has to." I nodded, bracing myself for the truth. He sat down across from me, his hands trembling as he placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. "What you're dealing with, Maya, it's bigger than you think. Your family, your sister, they're not just involved in a few shady deals. They've been running a money laundering operation through your family's business for years. They've been washing money for some of the most dangerous people in the city, including members of an underground syndicate." I leaned forward, unable to hide my shock. A syndicate? But I thought it was just about the trust fund, about them stealing from me. "That's just the surface," Tony continued, his voice low. "They've been using the family's connections to hide illegal operations for years. The theft of the money from the business? That was a cover-up. The real deal was always much bigger. And Elena?" He shook his head. "She's more involved than you realize. She's not just a puppet. She's one of them now. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. My sister, the person I had once considered my blood, my family, was entangled in a world far darker than I had ever imagined. "How do you know all this?" I asked, my mind racing to piece together the puzzle. Tony took a deep breath. "I used to work for them until I realized what they were doing. When I tried to get out, they threatened my family. They made it clear that the consequences of exposing them would be worse than death. But the truth has a way of coming out. They can only hide it for so long." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. All these years, I thought I was the one who had been abandoned. But now, it was clear. My family had sold their souls, and I had been collateral damage. I stood up, unable to sit still anymore. "How do we take them down?" "You don't just take them down. You burn them to the ground," Tony replied, his eyes meeting mine with a dangerous glint. "But it won't be easy. We need to expose everything. The money, the documents, the people they've been working with. You're going to need more than just the law. You're going to need leverage. And I have it." I raised an eyebrow. "Leverage? What kind of leverage?" Tony leaned forward, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been collecting evidence for years, and I've got something that could destroy your sister and everyone involved, but I need you to do something for me, something that'll make sure they can't escape the consequences." The plan we laid out wasn't foolproof. In fact, it was risky as hell. But I knew it was the only chance we had, the only way I could ever reclaim my life. We started by gathering everything we could: the money laundering records, the illegal transactions, the bank statements that tied my family to the syndicate. We even got a hold of Elena's personal files, things she thought were well hidden. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the weight of it was suffocating. But as the days passed, the tension mounted. They knew we were coming for them. I could feel the eyes watching me everywhere I went. The phone calls, the strange figures following me around corners. Every moment was a game of cat and mouse, and I knew the stakes were higher than ever. One evening, as I was going over the evidence with Vincent, I received another mysterious message. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Stop now, or you will regret it." I looked at Vincent, who had been silently studying me. "It's them," I whispered. "They know. They're getting desperate." Vincent clenched his jaw, his expression hardening. "Let them come. We're ready." But I wasn't sure if I was ready. I had never thought it would come to this. The last time I had seen my family, I was dead in their eyes. Now, I was coming back to life, and I was taking them down. It was too late for second chances, but I wasn't sure if it was too late for me. The day of the confrontation came faster than I expected. Armed with all the evidence and a cold, unshakable resolve, I knew there was no turning back. We were about to expose the family I once knew, the people who had betrayed me. Tony had arranged a meeting with one of the underground syndicate's higher-ups, a man named Victor. He was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes, the mastermind, and he had been the one who had orchestrated my death. The meeting was set for a secluded building on the outskirts of the city. I arrived with Vincent, my pulse pounding in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral. This was it, the final move. When Victor walked into the room, I could feel the danger radiating from him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his face was a mask of indifference. But his eyes, those eyes were sharp, calculating. "So, you're the ghost that came back," he said, his voice smooth, with a hint of amusement. "I was wondering when you'd show up." I didn't waste time with pleasantries. You know why I'm here. Victor smirked, taking a seat across from me. I do. And I have to say, I'm impressed. Most people would have just stayed dead. But here you are, breathing, fighting, trying to take down your own blood. That's brave. I didn't flinch. I didn't come here to talk about bravery. I came here to take you down. Ah, Victor said, leaning back in his chair. And how do you plan on doing that exactly? With the documents? The fake records? You're just as much of a pawn in this game as anyone else. Your family thought they could erase you, but what they didn't count on was you fighting back. I'm not just fighting back, I said, my voice cold. I'm going to expose every single thing you've done. All the money you've laundered, the people you've used. This is the end of the line for you. Victor's smile faded. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. I'm not afraid of you, he spat, his voice turning venomous. You can't stop what's already been set in motion. You're already dead in their eyes. I stood up slowly, feeling a sense of power surge through me. Maybe, but I'm alive, Victor, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. The deal had been struck. Now, all I had to do was follow through. But the path forward was full of dangers. And as I walked away from that meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. The reckoning. The tension in the air was palpable as I prepared for the most important moment of my life. I had gathered the evidence. I had confronted the underground syndicate. But the final battle, the one that would shake the very foundation of my family, was about to begin. I stood in front of a mirror, adjusting my jacket, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger. The person I was now, strong, defiant, and ready to reclaim what was stolen from me, was far from the fragile woman who had once been cast aside by the family she loved. I had spent years in the shadows, mourning the loss of my identity, but today, I was reclaiming it. Behind me, the city buzzed with life, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. The plan was simple: confront my family at the memorial service for me, the fake funeral they had orchestrated to cover up their own dark secrets. The truth would come to light in front of everyone. I would make sure of it. I walked out the door, feeling the weight of my resolve settling in my chest. Every step was measured, every move calculated. The game was over. The lies were about to be exposed, and nothing, not even the dangerous people I had crossed paths with, could stop me now. St. Albans Church stood like an old sentinel, its stone walls towering above me. The heavy wooden doors were open, and a stream of mourners moved through, their faces painted with sorrow and false grief. It was as though the entire world had come together to mourn the death of someone they never truly knew. But I knew the truth. I was not dead, and today, I would show them that. I stood across the street, hidden in the shadow of a tall building, watching as the last of the mourners filed into the church. My heart pounded in my chest. The doors of the church slowly closed, and a faint bell tolled in the distance. They were all waiting for me to stay buried. They wanted to forget me, to erase me from existence. But I had no intention of letting that happen. Not anymore. I adjusted my sunglasses, the feeling of finality washing over me. This was it. This was my moment. The moment when I took back my life and forced my family to face their own lies. I walked up to the doors of St. Albans, my steps deliberate. The church was eerily silent as I pushed them open, the heavy oak doors groaning like a giant sigh as they parted. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as I stepped into the dimly lit sanctuary. The organ played mournfully in the background, the melody drifting through the air like a ghost. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Eyes turned toward me, disbelief written on every face. The priest, frozen in his steps, blinked several times as if trying to convince himself that the woman standing at the front of the church was not, in fact, the very person they had all been mourning. But I was there, alive, and I wasn't going to stay silent. The gasps continued as I walked slowly down the aisle. My mother's face went pale, her hand trembling as it clutched her lace handkerchief. My father stood stiffly beside her, his mouth hanging open, unable to speak. Elena, standing by their side, locked eyes with me. Her expression was one of shock, anger, and fear, all at once. She was the one who had orchestrated my death, the one who had replaced me, taken everything from me, and gotten away with it for so long. But today, she wouldn't escape. I reached the front of the church, stopping beneath the portrait of myself, the one they had used for my obituary, the one they had plastered everywhere to convince everyone that I was dead. Now, it was staring back at me like a cruel joke. I turned slowly to face the crowd. A few people raised their phones, unsure whether they were witnessing a ghost or something else entirely. The tension was thick enough to cut through with a knife. "I heard I died," I said, my voice echoing in the silence. "But I'm here to correct the story." A ripple of confusion and shock spread through the room. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. I reached into my coat and pulled out a thick stack of papers, documents, records, passport stamps, flight details, everything I had gathered over the last few days. These are my passport stamps, my employment records, my tax filings. I've been alive. I've been working. I've been surviving. The only thing I lost was them. I turned to face my parents. "You told the world I died. You faked the documents. You filed a certificate. And when I was legally gone, you took everything from me." A gasp rippled through the room. The room shifted, as though everyone was beginning to understand the magnitude of the betrayal they had been unknowingly part of. But I wasn't done. I looked directly at Elena, my voice steady, cutting through the silence. "My trust fund, my inheritance, everything. You took it all. You replaced me. You erased me." Elena's hands shook. Her pearls, which had once seemed like the symbol of her perfect life, were now just a symbol of her guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was frozen. Her entire facade was crumbling, piece by piece. "I came back to haunt you with the truth," I continued. "I didn't die. I was murdered by you, not physically, but emotionally. You buried me to protect yourselves. But now, you get to watch me walk back in." My words echoed through the church, each one striking like a hammer on stone. The mourners, the strangers who had come to this funeral, thinking they were witnessing the end of a life, were now realizing that they had been nothing but pawns in a family's sick game. They had believed the lies. They had been complicit in the cover-up. The priest stepped back, his hands trembling as he tried to regain composure. The silence in the room was suffocating. The gasps and murmurs were replaced by a deathly hush, as if no one knew what to say next. I stood there, at the front of the church, facing the people who had once been my family. My father, the man who had been my protector, now looked like a shell of the person he once was. His eyes were filled with guilt, but there was no remorse in his expression, no apology. My mother, her face still pale from the shock, looked away, She didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye. Elena, however, couldn't tear her gaze away from me. She knew. She knew the truth was out now, and she was going to have to face the consequences. I turned toward the back of the church, where the doors had swung open just a little wider, revealing a group of reporters waiting outside. They had all been tipped off. They knew this would be the moment. This would be the story that shook the city to its core. The truth had come to light, and there was no going back.